Hello, everybody. Michael Robertson Jr. here, back for episode 3 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. And of course, I have my co host, Mr. Jason Collins, here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and listening to us tonight.
So what's
How
up,
you doing
man?
tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you? You're drinking a beer, so it must have been a tough week.
You know, it's we're recording a day late. It's Thursday. I feel like once Thursday hits, it's okay to drink. I don't know why. It's my day.
Thursday's your day, not Friday. It's Thursday. Okay.
Hey, Thirsty Thursday. That's a people call Thirsty Thursday a thing.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. It's been interesting. For those of you that don't know this, if you haven't know much about me and Jason before this podcast, we both work day jobs in the IT career field. And with everything going on in the world right now, it's been very busy at both of our jobs trying to get things prepped and prepared for potential people working at home. It's been wild. It's just kind of been unprecedented. It's been very busy, very stressful for both of us. So we are very excited to sit down and do something fun and normal, so to speak, and stress-free and have this podcast tonight.
Now, you're talking about prepping. We are full-blown. Over 90% of our workforce is work from home this week. As of Thursday, everybody started going home.
Wow. That's
big. Just about 1,000 people
Jeez.
on the VPN. So this week has been just nonstop support with getting people, just working from home, connected to their own home Wi-Fi's with machines, not to mention the desktop support teams sending out equipment just all over the nation. It has been a logistical nightmare, and it's been quite busy.
Yeah, I think busy and panicked is the word of the week, the words of the week. But the good news is, before this week started and went crazy, you were able to sit down and watch this week's film. I had already seen this week's film when it was in the theater, and I was also able to rewatch it. So, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, tonight we are talking about a drama, a horror, a mystery thriller from June 2018 from director and writer Ari Aster, Hereditary. And this was a fantastic film.
This movie is legitimately one of the darkest movies I think I've ever seen. There's no other word for it. It held that place for me for a while until I saw Ari Aster's follow-up film, which was Midsommar, which came out last year, and I won't say much about that because we'll have an episode on that in the future. But this guy has a knack for just capturing dread. It's unreal. I'm really excited to talk about this. So yes, this was Ari Aster's debut film. Came out in 2018, like Jason said. It starred Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro as Charlie, Gabriel Byrne, and cinematographer Pavel Pogorzelski. I know I just butchered that name, but I wanted to mention him particularly because he also, just like we talked about Mike Flanagan and his cinematographer kind of dynamic duo on last week's episode, these guys were also working together on Midsommar, and it shows. They're kind of this writer, director, cinematographer duo that just are developing a look that is becoming apparent. You can just see it on screen.
Well, they're pals. They're pals from film school.
Right.
And it is, the cinematography in Hereditary was, it was unlike, there were things that happened with transitions and with like leading into certain scenes that were just so beautiful and well thought out. It was so good.
Right. And including the opening scene, which I thought was amazing, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you don't know what Hereditary is about, like Jason said, it is first and foremost, it's a very dark, just grief-filled family drama that transitions into just a full-fledged horror nightmare for this family, with some supernatural elements, some devil worshipping, cult following, just craziness. It's really dark.
Yeah, and it's not your run-of-the-mill jump scare horror film. This had some sort of just deep-seated darkness that you weren't scared. Like the things that were scaring you were not because of jump scares. There were things that were right there in front of you. You could see it happening, and it was horrifying. I
Yep.
mean, it was especially, and it was such a, I'd say it was a slow burn with a bit of a spark right in the middle, and then it was another slow burn up until the end, and it just got worse and worse and worse until the end. I was explaining this to somebody the other day, and there was no good ending. There wasn't a happy ending to this. It was the beginning of the end for humanity. It was.
Yeah,
It did not end well. And it was man, it was such a good movie. But it was like I said, it was not a run of the mill jump scare that we've become so accustomed to and sort of, just used to. This was a different type of film, and it hit on all of the right levels of horror.
It was deep. It was a very deep, thought-provoking, just like I said, it gets inside of you, this movie does. It gets into your psyche, into your soul, and it lingers there. And to perhaps put numbers to justify what you just said about it not being a run-of-the-mill jump scare mainstream film, this movie got an 89% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is ridiculously good for horror. That is super high, which means your quote-unquote critics, and people that know me and have heard me talk about this from the literature perspective and also with horror films, I don't take a whole lot of stock in critics sometimes, but horror films are notoriously low rated on Rotten Tomatoes. The critics don't love them. So the fact that this one resonated with so many quote unquote critics, I think is impressive, because I think it means Aster was able to do something that, had depth to it. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is on the cinema score rating, audiences gave this movie a D+ on a scale from A to F. So,
what do you think that is?
Well, because I think they love the jump scares. I think I don't want to say I don't know that audiences, your mainstream audience, average person that goes in to see a horror film, I think that they expect jump scares. They want the easy road. They don't like the deep rooted horror. I think more of your true hardcore horror fans, or maybe the ones that just have an appreciation for a deeper level of film, are the ones that are liking this. And the ones that are going in expecting, something fun, flashy, quick, the big booms, the big jumps, the big screams, they watch this movie and they probably get bored.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And there's also a few parts in this movie too that are shocking. They're hard to watch. And we'll get more into it later on why it's hard to watch. Mm-hmm. But they do not shy away from some very graphic scenes. And that's what I was wondering. I was wondering, like, because it's, old school slashers are very over the top with the blood, and it's all very still fake looking. But what they did in this film was very, very raw. And I think that I thought that might have had a lot to do with it, just because they don't shy away. I mean, this is a movie that they don't have jump scares where you have these moments of a high. I mean, this scares you deep, and it sticks with you for a while after you finish the movie.
Yeah, that's exactly. And the music, I think, lent itself just tremendously to this as well. It's just a very dark score that perfectly accentuates everything that's happening on screen. And I read a quote from Ari Aster, or an interview with Ari Aster, or maybe it was with the composer Colin Stetson,
Mm-hmm.
where he basically, Ari Aster just told him, I want it to sound evil, was what he said. I mean, which it did. I mean, that was a pretty simple guideline to follow, and he executed big time. I actually have been listening to it a little bit at work, and it's chilling, just even by itself without any visuals. It's some chilling music for sure.
Just the score you've been listening to?
Mm-hmm. Just the score.
Yeah. He picked up a few awards for Best Original Music and Best Score, which I knew before going into the film. But there was honestly very little music. It was just a lot of very eerie sounds going on. And he was also known for, I don't know if you knew this, but this is, I mean, you played this game, but he was known for, he scored Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, really? I didn't know
He
that.
did.
I actually did not know that. That's interesting. It's quite a different genre.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get started on the actual kind of diving into the story, again, I wanted to also mention that I caught wind of this movie because it premiered at Sundance in 2018, January 2018, in the midnight section, and immediately, the following days, I was seeing the blog posts and the articles and the reviews talking about just how scary it was, how fantastic it was, and immediately I bookmarked one of the articles because I wanted to remember to go see this movie when it came out, and it didn't come out till the summer; it came out in June, and I went to the theater to see it by myself. And the one odd thing about what happened to me in the theater while we were watching it, maybe about a quarter of the way into it, it was a fairly empty theater. It was the middle of the day, and a thunderstorm actually started happening where I was, and you could hear the torrential downpour outside the theater for the majority of the film. So that kind of added a little more of a ambiance, I guess, atmosphere to my theater going experience. But it was just kind of creepy.
Yeah, I watched it, in my home with my surround sound, and there was, and I'm sure you heard this too in the theater, but there was this, especially in the beginning, whenever I'm thinking back on it now, and I'm thinking whenever, and we'll get more to it, but when the demon was present with Charlie, there was this underlying ambient noise that I thought was something in my house, and I couldn't get it out of my. It was like it was disturbing to hear, but it was so low I couldn't tell what it was, and so I kept pausing the movie, and the sound would go away, and I was like, my gosh, it's under everything else that's going on. There was no music; it was just this sound, and then it would go away as soon as that scene was done. But that sound would carry through scene after scene after scene until until the demon was done with whatever he was doing at that point. But there's so many things happening in the beginning that you're just picking up on, but they don't pay off until way at the end of the movie.
Right. So the plot of this movie is fairly simple on the surface, and that is essentially we are thrown right into the beginning where this family is going to attend. There's a mom, a dad, a son, and a daughter. The son is older. He is probably in, I don't know, 17, maybe almost 18 years old. And then the daughter is 13. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And they're getting ready to go attend the funeral for the mother's mother, so the children's grandmother. And right off the bat, this movie never has any moment of warmth or happiness. Right off the bat, you can tell that these people are hurting in different ways amongst all of them. It's very dark right from the beginning. So they're going to the funeral for the children's grandmother, and immediately there's something odd about her. You pick up on this very quickly, that there is something off and odd about the grandmother, from the reaction of the funeral attendees, the reaction of the various members of the family, especially Toni Collette. It's her mother that died. Her performance throughout this movie, just dealing with so many emotions, is phenomenal. And in fact, I think honestly, it's probably one of the reasons this movie was so successful at the box office. Her name probably brought some people in, I think, and then her performance, I think people got wind of that, and it intrigued people. But long and the short of it is, we find out that the grandmother was actually basically the leader, so to speak, of this cult following, this demonic cult following. She was their, was it queen or princess? We see her on the wall near the end, a picture of her.
Yeah, she was their leader of some sort, and that doesn't come into play until later in the end. I mean, going through with the name of the movie, you open up right into, into the funeral where she's given her eulogy, and the mom, Toni Collette, and you immediately find out that she's a very quiet person, a very private person. She even mentions a lot of the people at the funeral she's never even seen before. So as she's going through, she goes to a self-help, group therapy, and she talks about her history, and you quickly learn that, oh, okay, her father killed himself, and so did her brother, and her mother was schizophrenic, and so you immediately start to think in the very first half of the movie, you think, okay, this family has inherited some sort of mental health issues. That's what you're thinking. But it turned out to be much more evil than that going forward. And that's when you're talking about how she is the leader of some sort of, I guess it's a cult, but they're satanic in ways, and they're worshiping. His name was Paimon.
Yes.
Paimon.
Yes. Their god who would
he was the demon of mischief, and he's a real demon in the that's written about, and he's one of many demons, and he was one of the more loyal demons, and I guess he was sent by the devil to the West, and he caused mischief. So he was the demon of mischief.
Ladies and gentlemen, none of that is in the movie. Jason has obviously done a deep dive into demons over the last few days. So thank you for the history lesson.
As soon as I realized that he was a real demon, like a real, that he was from, I don't even know what he's from, but it was interesting that they used, literature for the demon, because it was very interesting. And it plays into a lot of things that you see in the movie too, which we'll talk about.
Right. So one of the other things that we noticed very quickly about the grandmother is, Toni Collette's. She has several speeches throughout this film. The funeral speech she gives, the monologue she gives during her grief counseling support group. But even in between all this, we realized that the only person that the grandmother actually really had any care for, any interest in, was the daughter, Charlie, the 13-year-old.
It was an unhealthy obsession from the very beginning. The mom talks about how when she was born, she wouldn't even let the mother feed her,
right?
Which I don't know what that means. I don't know if the mom was the mom couldn't breastfeed her, I'm sure, but
well, it's funny you say that, because we missed a very crucial part of the beginning here that I'll circle back to talk on your breastfeeding. But actually, let's talk about it now. So and we're sorry we're jumping around a little bit, but the opening scene of this movie we talked about, which I thought was so cool, was this pan of this art studio that basically Toni Collette has made in her attic. She is an artist. She makes these little miniature, I guess, dioramas of real life. So she's got miniature houses and miniature a preschool, a hospice room, stuff like that. And the opening scene of the movie...
that's her job.
That is her job.
She makes miniature exhibits. Mm-hmm.
Yes. The opening scene of the movie does this really cool pan across this room in real life, and then begins to zoom in and just push in, I should say, onto the miniature of their very own house, the house that they're living in. And it does this push all the way up to the son's, which is ultimately the son's bedroom. And it just keeps pushing in until the miniature fills the screen. And then it becomes basically live action right there. And the movie starts. I thought it was just a super slick transition to start the film.
A perfect transition, but also a perfect analogy for the whole film, how everything is being controlled by some sort of outside force, how everything is they have no control over what's going on. They are just a miniature of somebody else's plan.
Man, he is getting deep tonight. I tell you what, he is just on the ball with the demons and the symbolism. Oh man,
I thought it was a brilliant movie, man. I really appreciated this movie for a lot of different aspects.
It's brilliant. And I talked, I didn't really speak, but I texted Jason yesterday. I was actually reading through the screenplay that Ari Aster wrote for this movie, and that whole beginning scene is scripted. That whole transition, that whole opening scene is on the page. That's the way he wanted to start the movie. So it's amazing. But back to the breastfeeding, which is where we left off. If there is a scene in the movie briefly where there is a little miniature, I guess, diorama, a scene that she created of her holding her daughter and breastfeeding, and the grandmother is also beside the bed, standing with her breast out. So
Okay. Yes. I remember seeing that now. I remember being so confused about it at the time, and it did make sense, but now it does.
yeah. So there's an interesting line that means a lot, that does foreshadow quite a bit, when after the funeral later that day, Toni Collette is speaking to Charlie, the daughter, and of course the whole mood in the house is somber. The whole movie is somber, to be honest. She's trying to talk to Charlie, and Charlie is a very odd child. She's a very quiet, very reserved child. The word that is used to describe her in the screenplay is androgynous, which I thought they really kind of nailed the casting with that as well. And Millie Shapiro did a really fantastic job acting in this film, because I went and kind of did a little bit of research on her as well. She was actually on Broadway as Matilda, and won a Tony Honor Award in 2013 for Matilda, and also nominated for a Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album for being in Matilda. So
No way.
Yeah.
So she is very upbeat and happy.
right, exactly, and she is the opposite in this film.
Yeah, not in this movie.
But they're discussing, how she feels, that she's upset that her grandmother has died, and Toni Collette is trying to kind of lift this child's spirits, and she's like, you were her favorite, right? And she has a very interesting response to that, where she says, she wanted me to be a boy. This is what Charlie is saying back to Toni Collette. And that, we come to find out, that means something quite significant at the end of the film, and kind of what takes everything off in the direction that we end up going in. So there's a reason much, much deeper than just grandmother, granddaughter love. That is why the grandmother had such affection and interest in Charlie.
I would say affection's the wrong word. It's very much interest, very much making sure everything is lined up and in place and things are happening the way they should.
Right.
It
And
makes me wonder if her death was planned as well.
I don't know. That's a good question. She was obviously old. I mean, there's nothing that really seemed to indicate that they would be immortal or have prolonged life because of whatever worshiping they did. I'm not actually, because of the way the movie ends with a possession that we'll talk about, I don't really fully understand if the grandmother had any type of being in her as well, or if she was just kind of like the high leader of this cult following. I'm not sure.
I mean, we're made to believe that there was a grand plan throughout the entire thing. Everything was orchestrated to happen certain ways, even down to the very shocking scene of Charlie's death.
Right,
and we'll get to that in just a second. Yeah. But the part that made me think about, made me wonder days after that, I was why was the grandmother dead? Was that part of the plan, or did she just die because she was old and sick? And I forget her name now, but that one woman took over and then just continued the plan, or not.
Yeah, Ann Dowd is also in this film. She is a supporting role, but also basically is the one that gets everything moving at the end. And I don't think the grandmother's death was part of the plan. I think it was probably planned for. There was a contingency if she was to die. I don't think that her death was part of the plan. That's me personally. And I want to talk about Charlie's death when we get there, because I had questions about that. I actually have it written down to ask about how that affected the story. We're kind of leading up to this. The only other thing that we know about the family dynamic, again, this family on the surface appears miserable. The only one that seems to have any desire to make the family happy and to live a normal life is the father, and even he is very ho-hum Eeyore-ish. He's just,
I don't know if he's ho-hum Eeyore-ish. I took him as a very quiet man that's doing his best to hold it together for his family.
I guess I meant personality.
Gabriel did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, personality. He's very quiet. He's very quiet. You're right.
Mm-hmm. I think he was just doing his best to hold it together, trying to keep everybody from falling apart. There's a couple times where he very emphatically said, "Be quiet. That's enough. We're not doing that." So I thought he did a good job, but overall the family was not close. I mean, they were not loving in any way. There was even moments where the father would try to be loving with the mother, Toni Collette, and she would brush him off, and there was not, he did a very good job. He was trying to make sure everybody knew that he was there for them, but ultimately in the end it just it didn't matter. Went up in flames.
They were all went up in flames. Yeah, yes, he did. They were all suffering. They were all fighting their own battles in one way, shape, or form. There was obviously strain on the marriage. There was strain between the mother and both of her children for various reasons. She was estranged from her mother. Nobody really seemed to have a great love for one another, like you said, except for the father, who I think really was trying and just was getting very tired of having to try, which eventually comes out, near the end as well. He kind of gets fed up as Toni Collette's character goes a little deeper off the end.
So right about middle of the movie here. So again, another one of those situations. Did you want to say something else?
Well, I was just going to say there's also, and this is one of those movies where, last week's episode with Dr. Sleep, we were able to really talk about a lot of the scenes in detail and explain what was happening. This is one of these movies where, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't seen Hereditary, you really have to watch it to understand some of the visual cues that were given to you to explain this story. There was a lot of very subtle flashes of imagery of symbols on the wall, the books that she found from her mom. There's a lot of unspoken information that is given in this film to the reader that's all very subtle, including, one beat too long than normal of a telephone pole as they're going to the party, which is going to lead us up to Charlie's death, which we'll talk about. But there is also some very haunting imagery or some very creepy things that happen in the house before that, where Toni Collette kind of sees the potential spirit ghost of her mom lingering in the corner one night, which, is one of those scenes where there's something in the corner. What is it? You can see it very clearly, and then when you turn the lights on, it's gone. It's a horror trope. We've seen that 1,000 times. It's still creepy in this movie. It's still eerie the way this movie plays out. This movie's edited perfectly between all the visuals and all the audio and all the performances. It's really, really good.
And again, and to reiterate, there is no jump scare, right? She just looks in she turns the light off, and you see her looking into the corner, and she just kind of stares, and she gets a face, and then you look in there, and they look into the corner, the camera does, and you're just looking for a minute, and then all of a sudden you see the figure come out, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's something there, and then she turns the light on, it's gone,
Yeah.
and that's the end of the scene. That's it.
Done.
Right? It's just enough though to like, oh, okay, something's happening, something's going on.
Yep.
But you later find out it's just the demon of mischief.
We're gonna take a real quick break, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about that shocking scene of Charlie's death, which I think took a lot of people by surprise. Okay, we are back, and I don't even know if this was middle of the movie. I think this scene may have happened slightly before the middle of the film, which made it even more shocking. If you saw any of the trailers for Hereditary, Charlie is featured prominently in the trailers, and they focus a lot on whatever is afflicting her, and you're just kind of led to believe she's the star of this movie. Like, maybe not the star, but she is a focal point of this movie. And I later read, when they were devising the trailer, that this was done intentionally because they wanted her death to be a shock. And I'll tell you right now, again, when I saw it in the theater, I knew nothing about it except that trailer, and I saw it, I may have audibly gasped, just, oh my God, she's gone. Like, let's talk about that scene, because there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, for sure. And not only that scene, but also the build up too. Again, going back to things happening for a reason. I gotta think that everything in this movie had to happen for a reason, whether it was orchestrated by the cult, or if it was just somehow, the demon nudging ideas into people. But the mother was very insistent for some reason for the brother to take Charlie to this party. It was just a high school party, and he just got a few texts. He was not doing anything. They texted him, said to come. He said he was going to a barbecue, as kids lie. And all of a sudden she is pushing very hard to take the sister to this party where it's a bunch of high schoolers and his friends, and you're bringing some tiny child. So I thought that was weird to force her to go along, but here we are. She's at a party. We are sort of led to believe in the beginning that she is allergic to peanuts. And at the party, she's left alone. He's going to smoke a bong with some friends, and she sees some cake that has peanuts in it. So as I'm sure you know, that she gets the cake, she starts to have a reaction, and that's when the brother panics, picks her up. He's being a hero. We're going to go get you some help. Puts her in the back seat. She's having a very hard time breathing. He is flying down the road, and she sticks her head out of the window to get some air, I guess, because she's having a hard time breathing. And there's a dead animal in the road. He swerves, misses the dead animal, goes just off the road, and completely decapitates his little sister.
Yes.
I mean,
just head pops right off. It was jarring to not know it was coming. I mean, it is just one of those movie moments where you can never relive again with the same impact that it has on you the first time you see it. It is just
Michael. I covered my face as soon as it happened. I was so shocked. I hit pause. I covered my face. I was like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that just happened." I was just so shocked.
Yeah. So now we have a headless corpse of Charlie in the back seat of the vehicle, and the brother slows down. He stops.
He stops.
Right. And I want to talk about Alex Wolff's performance here for a second, because watching this movie the second time, and it's been too long since I watched it the first time to really remember all of my emotions, but watching it the second time, there were moments where I did not love Alex Wolff's performance. And this is not, I'm not criticizing the guy, because he's still a fantastic actor. I mean, everybody in this movie does a great job. There were times where when he was crying and speaking through his crying with some of the scenes with his mother, that it felt a little forced to me. Like it felt like it felt to me, it was like I was watching somebody pretend to cry and have an argument. And maybe it was just the way that I perceived it. Again, he's a fantastic actor. He has some amazing moments in this film. But there was moments where he took me out of it more than any other actor did. And I feel bad for saying that, because who am I? I'm not an actor, but there's just moments where it jarred me a little bit. But his reaction in the car after his sister is killed, and then the subsequent scene where he gets home and he goes and he lays in the bed and everything's happening, that is some of the best just shock I think that I've seen on screen. After I just, bashed his crying, I thought his shock was just unreal, because it's like he is literally unsure what he is supposed to do, how he is supposed to process what just happened.
He immediately clams up. Right, exactly. He doesn't know how to process his feelings. He doesn't know how to interact with anybody. In fact, you never even see him interact with anybody. That happens. He doesn't even turn around and look at what happened in the back seat. He just knows what happened. Right. He stops, and then very disappointingly just continues to drive home.
Right.
Leaving her poor head right there beside the light post. So he goes home. He parks the car just in the middle of the driveway. He gets out of the car, goes inside, immediately lays in bed. And there is just the next morning, you hear the mother go outside, starts screaming. The screaming transitions into the funeral. It's a very, very difficult scene to watch.
It is. And I thought it was a brilliant way to shoot it because we never actually we don't see the mother find Charlie's body. There's like you said, what is his name? What's the son's name? I forget. Is it Peter? It's Peter, right?
Peter is the actor. Yeah.
Yes.
Or not the actor. His actor's name, but his character's Peter.
Yeah.
Right.
So we see Peter go home in shock, go in the house, lay down in bed, and then it transitions to morning, and he's still just laying in his bed. The camera is close up on his face. His eyes are wide open. He's unmoving. He's still in shock, and all we hear from this lockdown shot is the mother say, "I'm going to run out." We hear her go outside. We hear her get to the car, and then we hear the screaming. We never leave his face, and he is absolutely stoic, no reaction. It's just a really, really neat scene to watch. It's terrifying. It's tragic, but it's just a really cool way that they presented that. So yeah, now we have another funeral. We've got 2 funerals within the first half of the film. The mother is obviously devastated. She's broken down even more. And this is really where the film transitions and things just rapidly begin to fall apart.
And real quick, to build up why the mother is so devastated, not only because a mother would be devastated, but because she did not do a great job at raising her. That was mostly her mother's job. And at one point, right after her mother, Ellen, had died, and they were back at the bedroom scene where she was talking to Charlie. Charlie asked her, "Who's going to take care of me now?" And the mother's like, "Well, I am. I'm your mother, right?" But of course, she does not really know how to do that. She's not a great mother, to be honest, and she knows that. And so when this happens, she's just devastated because not only has she lost her daughter, but now it's more of just a confirmation of just really how bad of a job she's doing.
Right. And talk about, being a poor mother. She has that dream sequence scene when she's really psychologically deteriorating, and there's things that are happening with, I think some persuasion from this demon. She has that nightmare scene where she's actually standing in Peter's bedroom and they're having this conversation, and she accidentally admits, "I never wanted to be your mother." And what she meant by that was she was just so scared. She wasn't ready. And she's always, I think, that's always been felt between them. And there's more to their story that, we won't get into a ton of. It's explained better, but long and the short of it is, again, this family ultimately is dysfunctional. There's a lot of problems in this family.
And part of that also goes back to, again, the pushing and the planning of the mother, Ellen, and that whole cult and the demon. She didn't want to have kids. She didn't want to continue to have Peter, but the mother insisted that she continue with this pregnancy, despite apparently the mother's attempt to miscarriage multiple times. It never took, and here we are. She's got this baby that she doesn't want, and that carried over throughout the years.
And so before we I forgot to mention the question that I had with Charlie's death in terms of the planning. So we find out that this demon needs to be in a male's body. And near the end, we find out that they were trying to use Charlie because the grandmother had this better connection and was able to kind of use her as this vessel to start with. So on paper, it makes sense that they would try to get rid of Charlie to, I guess, free this thing to then go into Peter, because I don't really understand what the reason for Charlie's death would be from the demon's perspective. If they could they not do everything else that they did if Charlie wasn't dead? Could they not still take over the boy the way that they did, take over the mom the way that they did to lead into all these events? Did they need the grief of her death to push the mom over the edge?
Well, and also the thing that I had a question of is why was Charlie the host at all? why wasn't Peter the host from the beginning?
Right.
He was a male host, unless he was too young.
He was older.
And
He was the older child. He was the first child, which is
well,
where
I
I get
understand
confused.
that. That's my point. Like, why skip over him and go to Charlie just to go right back to him in the end?
Right. I'm not sure, to be honest. Unless maybe we forgot this. The mother was estranged from Toni Collette's character was estranged from her mother, the grandmother, for a very long time. So she wasn't there.
She wouldn't let her near the house, near them at all, the family.
So she didn't come back into the picture until Charlie, and she was younger. So that explains it.
Okay.
Good job.
Yeah, that makes sense.
High five. Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay.
High five.
Yep.
From an appropriate distance.
Right. Social distancing. Okay. Yes. So Charlie's dead, and anything that might have been repairable in this house has now basically been destroyed. The mom is at her wit's end. The son is obviously recovering from his tragedy. His relationship with his mother now is obviously even worse because effectively he did accidentally kill his younger sister, and nothing goes right at this point. Nothing goes right. There's also talk about
maybe everything goes right.
Well, yes, if you're rooting for Payman to come back, and am I saying that correctly, Mr. Devil Expert? Is it Payman?
I'm pretty sure it's Payman. I don't think I ever heard them say the name out loud. They just saw it. You saw it in text, but I'm pretty sure his name's Payman.
I think they did say at the end when they in the treehouse.
Did they?
I think so, because they say all hail something. Yeah. Anyway, this stays a family drama, ratcheted up for maybe another, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes of the film, where you have the dinner table scene where they're yelling at each other, the mother and the son. The dad, gets mad at the son for a little bit for talking to his mother that way, and it's a very uncomfortable scene. You can kind of imagine yourself there. We've all had those family dinners where nobody wants to talk to anybody because we're all just waiting for somebody to get upset. It's like that, but it's 100 times worse. And from there, we get Ann Dowd's character at the grief counseling session. She comes in with trying to be helpful. We don't know at the time that she is nothing but another servant for the demon, and she's clearly playing her game. And I think from here, I really want to talk about the seance scene where she's teaching Toni Collette how to perform the seance to bring back the spirit of the lost loved ones, which then ultimately brings back a lot of bad stuff. But there's a couple things about that scene that I want to talk about. The first is, again, Toni Collette's performance is unreal. Her reactions are so amazing. I mean, somebody that legitimately is absolutely just flabbergasted and unbelieving almost of what they're seeing. It's phenomenal. But that's also a really cool scene in general, with some of the practical effects that they used. The chalkboard, I thought, was just so cool. The little flip of her hair off to the side. I mean, it's so easy, but it was so effective.
If you haven't seen the movie, so there's a chalkboard on the table, and there's a little piece of chalk, and it flips up and it starts writing, "I love you, Grandma," on the chalkboard because she summoned her grandson, which we later find out she doesn't have one, but she summoned that, and he wrote for her. But yeah, for the practical effect of the piece of chalk actually having to move on the chalkboard, they filled the piece of chalk with some magnets, and then they were under the table trying to move it. And they said it was the most difficult, tedious thing to get that thing to stay up and still move.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was filled with practical effects, and it was a great scene acting wise. Toni Collette has a range of emotions in this one movie, unlike I've seen in a while. She has to be very happy, very convincingly happy, legitimately happy in other scenes, and then also legitimately just terrified in others.
Yeah, she wasn't happy often. She was definitely not happy the majority of the film, but the scenes with Charlie where she was trying to be pleasant and to be the mom, yeah. And so you want to talk a little bit about ultimately what the purpose is now Charlie's dead, and Ann Dowd's character has come in and kind of begun to mentor Toni Collette. She doesn't know she's being mentored. She thinks she's being helped by a friend who's also suffering. But they are basically reaching their claws in and grabbing Toni Collette to perform the work that needs to be done to essentially, I guess they're bringing Charlie's spirit back, which then ultimately leads to the demon possessing the son. Is that the way that you interpreted what happened?
I'm trying to think if we saw Payman in any other form before then, but we do see him in his glimmer. I don't know what else to call it, but he's got this glimmer that shows up when he's around, and we see that before the actual summoning of Charlie back. So he's around the whole time. I'm not sure why we had to summon Charlie back.
Yeah, that's, again, there's parts of this that I don't know that and I can remember having this conversation with a buddy of mine at work after he had seen it in the theater as well, where we both loved it. And then as we started talking about it, we got to these kind of same questions. We're like, I'm not sure I fully understand what even happened in some of these pieces, but I know I still really liked it. And it comes to, you understand at the end exactly what happened.
Yeah, for sure. But during that summoning, that's a really great scene too, because she summons Charlie back.
Oh, when
in her own summoning, right after she was taught how to summon, she comes back to the house. She wakes every bit up in the middle of the night, brings everybody down, has her notepad. That was her connection to Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
And she summons her in. She gets very upset for a minute. Charlie, I think, starts breaking things, but then she takes over Annie, the mother, for a moment, which was really creepy.
Yep.
And just terrified the son, Peter. Mm-hmm. And until Steve, the father, runs in and throws water on her, she's sitting there just talking in Charlie's voice. Charlie can't say anything. She doesn't know what's going on. And she's just saying, "What's going on? I'm scared. Where's mommy? What's happening?" And it's just very, very troubling.
Yeah, that's a fantastic scene. That's to hear Charlie's voice kind of mixed with Toni Collette's voice in Toni Collette's body.
It was disturbing.
Acting like a scared child. Yeah, that was really disturbing. And
going back to your mentioning of Alex Wolff's performance, I never liked his like completely freaked out performance. Him like sitting there screaming and crying.
Yeah.
Always was like, I don't know. I don't really buy that. It's sort of weird what you're doing, the whole like breaking down and crying thing that he did.
Yeah.
But he freaks out.
I think that's what I was kind of talking about, like those scenes where he gets so upset. That was it took me out a little bit. Mm-hmm. But after this, everything goes to hell very, very quickly. Peter, the son, he has a really neat scene in the school where he's basically, is that the point where he kind of gets, I guess, somewhat taken over by?
I think the possession doesn't take 100%, because I don't think it can take 100% in a live body, which is part of the reason why they had to have him dead in the end. But I think he does. He just starts messing with him I don't know how else to say it. He starts really just kind of toying with him for the next like half hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he like you said, he sort of takes possession of him in the school, in the classroom.
I really love that scene where he's sitting at his desk and he looks at his reflection in I guess like a bookshelf or something to his left, and real life Peter has a completely confused and somber look on his face. And when he turns and looks at his reflection in this piece of glass, he is looking back at himself with this smug smile on his face.
It's like a sinister grin.
Yeah.
It was not pleasant.
Yeah. And then he basically has a spasm and his body is taken over. And among other things, he slams his head onto his desk repeatedly. I
will commend him for his performance for that.
Yeah,
because he wanted to slam his own face quite hard into the desk. They ended up again, but going back to practical effects, they made a rubber desk for him to slam his face into, and he wanted to legitimately break his nose, and he wanted to slam his face into the desk as hard as he could.
I know
he did a good job.
I know I had a little like bash session about some of the way he acted in this film, but again, he's amazing. I don't know if you saw any of the behind the scenes stuff. I watched it on the iTunes extras. He apparently is a method actor, and the entire time that he was on set, he never introduced himself as Alex Wolff. He was Peter. And there's a clip of Ari Aster directing a scene, and he's having a conversation with Alex Wolff, and he answers back, and he says, "All right, great, thanks, Peter." And he turns and he walks away. So I mean, Ari Aster's obviously recognizing this is the way this guy works. Like,
that's awesome.
I'm gonna roll with it.
There's another tidbit I saw on IMDb that Ari Aster really wanted Peter and Charlie, the brother and sister, to have a very strong connection. He made them go out to dinner one night together in character. And the whole scene was Peter had to talk to Charlie the whole time, trying to get her to talk. And Charlie just would never talk to him. But his job was to sit there and just talk to her the whole time, trying to get her to talk like a brother talking to a troubled sister. And I thought that, and that lasted hours, apparently. I just thought that was so crazy. That was so cool.
That's really, really, really fun to hear that kind of stuff. So after the school scene, the dad goes and picks up the son from school. The mom comes home. She's freaking out because she wants to know what's wrong. There is a lot of stuff that happens very quickly in the end of this movie. And I mentioned before how you really kind of have to watch this movie to understand all the subtle clues that are dropped to the viewer. And something that happens early in the film, shortly after the grandmother's funeral, is there's a phone call that the dad takes that's from the cemetery, and it's never really explained out loud, which I love. You just infer based on the little keywords that you get. He's talking to the director of the cemetery. We know that. He kind of goes off to the side and he goes, what does that mean, desecrated? Mm-hmm. And so he's, oh shoot, something happened to the gravesite. And it never comes up again until right near the end. He's at the computer and he reads an email about an insurance claim that they put in for the damage to the gravesite. And there's pictures and it's basically all dug up. And you go, And then very shortly after that, we learn that the grandmother's body has been in the freaking attic the entire time, with no head, by the way. I think we should point that out.
I have a question about that later.
Okay. So yeah, at this point, the mother is convinced she is grief stricken and losing her mind, and she's trying to get her daughter back. And then she feels like she's kind of made a mistake with this because of some of the reactions that she's seeing. She's psychologically deteriorating, and she has Charlie's journal, which is, I guess, the token that she used to her sketchbook that she used to summon her back. And she's trying to get her husband to burn it. She wants it to burn, to go away, because she thinks that's going to be the solution to end all this. And
now, she already tried to burn this one time, and she realized that she couldn't burn it because when she threw the book into the fire, herself started to turn, or started to burn, right?
Yep.
So I think for self-preservation's sake, she needed her husband to do it, and she was fully prepared to die over it. You know, she knew what was going to happen.
Right.
So she was trying to convince Steve, her husband, to throw this book into the fire.
Right. And you think he's going to for a minute, and you kind of see him. This is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for him. He knows there are deep issues with his wife at this point that they're coming very close to not being able to come back from. And he's trying to offer her help. And you see him acquiesce for a second. He takes the journal and he's going to go do it. And he kind of stops and he turns and he goes, I can't do this. There's a moment of heated, I guess, reaction. She grabs it. She throws it into the flames in frustration, and poof. As you alluded to earlier, the husband goes up in flames.
That was a shocking scene.
Yeah.
I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah. And from this point, I keep saying this, the last half hour of this movie, maybe last 20 minutes of this movie, is just nonstop pandemonium, just weird, unexpected scenes,
There
unaccepted
was a
set
lot
pieces.
of scary shit happening.
Yeah, and just things that you just don't see. I mean, like, so anyway, the husband is dead, the mom disappears, and Peter kind of snaps out of his little funk and comes down trying to figure out what's going on. And go ahead.
Did you see it? And I'm sure you jumped right over it when he caught out of his funk and in the bed.
What
Do you remember seeing?
Oh, the person
him?
that floating or crawling across the wall or whatever? Is that what you're talking about?
I think she was flying.
Oh, I thought she was crawling.
I think she was floating. She was flying through the air.
Okay.
And I saw it. And I had to back it up. I was like, did I just see what I think I just saw? Because it was like so quick and just so disturbing to see. And right before that, he got up. Well, basically, he got up because he saw Charlie.
Yeah, that was
again, it was just Payman just messing with him. You know?
Yeah. There's a scene where he sees his dead sister's ghost that has a neat little twist at the end as well. So he goes down the stairs and he finds the charred remains of his father by the fireplace. And then something happens. By the way, some random naked cult following dude comes in behind him and stares at him for a little bit.
It's true. Yeah.
This movie has so many odd things.
Where he's looking at his father on the floor, the camera angle is angled such in a way that you can see behind him, and his mother is way up in the corner of the ceiling, just looking and watching everything happen. It is the weirdest stuff. And I have an interesting fact about Payman. He could also fly. And so when he took over Annie,
that's why she could fly all over the place.
She
could just float up the stairs too at the treehouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So something happens here that I made a note of because I just thought it was funny. I mean, there's no other way. In a movie that is so dark and so serious and no humor at all, I thought this was kind of funny just because of a horror trope. After, he sees his father's charred corpse here, and there's this moment of tension with the stuff kind of happening in the background. Then there's the pistol start. There's the Annie, she jumps out of the corner, to come after him. And he snaps out of his trance and he takes off. He turns around and he sprints. And where does he go? He goes right past the front door and straight up the damn stairs.
Just in typical horror fashion.
But wait, there's more. Once he gets to the top of the stairs, instead of going into any of the plethora of rooms that are up there available that have solid doors that he could get behind and barricade, he continues to run straight up the attic stairs that have been pulled down from the ceiling. He goes to the highest point of the house with no way out, no real way out. And I just thought that was so funny because in a movie that has really not had any horror tropes applied to it or anything that was questionable except trying to figure out what's happening, in the very end, he makes two very, very questionable decisions of where he goes. It ends up in the worst possible place in the house where... Again, I mean, this plot is so hard to explain in terms of what actually happens because it's so all over the place near the end, but there are some fantastic jarring visuals with Annie at this point.
The attic is thick with cult signs and rituals happening upstairs. One thing I wanted to mention real quick about the attic ladder, which was just a great scene where he runs up the ladder and he closes it, and then you hear some banging, and then the visual of her on the ceiling, like she's on all fours on the floor,
right?
But she's on the ceiling, slamming her head into the door, but so fast. I mean, it was like it gave me chills watching it. I was like, oh my god, that's freaky.
Yeah, that is so sick. And then, of course, in the attic, he sees all kinds of bad stuff, and then we have Annie in the attic.
I don't know how she got in there.
I don't know either.
But this brings me to my question: what the hell was with all the beheadings? Why does everybody's head fall off in this entire movie? I other than Charlie's head showing some sort of significance at the very end that we can talk about in a minute, other than her head being significant with not being attached to her body, why did everybody else's head fall off in this movie?
I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me. You're the demon expert. I figured it was part of it.
Oh my gosh. If that was, I missed it.
Okay.
It's like, why is everybody's head missing in this damn movie?
I don't know.
Like,
So I'm not even going to tell the listeners how Annie cuts her head off, because I think it's so gruesome and so just sickening how they linger on it for a bit. But yeah, she's in the attic now. She's cutting her own head off. There's more people up there that he sees. There's 3 of them up there in the attic with him, isn't there? Some of the cult members.
yeah, the cult members, these naked cult members just pop up out of nowhere. I don't know where they came from. They're in the shadows. They're on the property. The poor dog dies. It's all kinds of weirdness happening right there in the last like 3 or 4 minutes.
Well, we should also point out that there's also some clues in the film, I think, as well, that are, again, very subtle, that the cult members have been coming to the house when the family wasn't there to have this attic basically be, the chamber that all this stuff is happening. They put the body there. They're putting the symbols on the wall. They're doing this. And there's a scene that I actually didn't even remember, if I'm being honest, seeing when I watched it, because I think it probably would have appeared to be insignificant in the film, but I saw it when I was reading the script last night, is if you remember when they come home from the grandmother's funeral in the beginning, the dad is adamant about taking the shoes off. He says, everybody, hey, shoes off. Hey, come back down here, because Charlie's running up the stairs with her shoes on. He says, come back down here. And everybody takes shoes off. And in the script, and again, I can't remember if it was in the movie, he looks down at the floor and he's like, see, look at this. All these footprints all over the house. And he's talking
that
about,
was not in the movie.
Was it not in the movie?
I don't remember seeing that in the movie.
I have to go back and look at it again, but it's in the script where I think it was a very quick just allusion to the fact that people have been there without them being there. So the cult members are the ones that have put the grandmother's body in the attic. They're the ones doing
That's
this.
interesting. I hadn't put that together. It makes total sense, but I had not even thought about that.
Yeah. So now we're at the climax. Well, we've been at the climax, but Peter freaks out. There's nowhere to go because he has made 2 poor choices when he was running away. He's in the attic. There's bad stuff. His mom is cutting her own head off, and left with no other choice, and ultimately doing what Payman needs him to do. He jumps out the window, this 3rd floor window, and crashes down to the ground below.
Well, he put himself in that position.
Right.
He has nobody to blame but himself.
Yeah, if he'd watched any 80s slashers, he would know that you should not go up the stairs. But
the high ground is not the best place for this type of movie. Yeah, he throws himself out the window. Presumably, he dies immediately, and that's when we see Payman's flashy little spirit floating down and take over a dead body of Peter, and which he wakes up, and I guess at that point that's Payman.
Yep, that is, because then we didn't mention this, but there's a treehouse in the backyard of this house that was Charlie's. She spent lots of time up there, and Peter / Payman, when he arises now, newly formed, he sees his mother. And his mother and his grandmother, or is it just his mother? I can't remember. There's light coming from the treehouse, and they are floating up the ladder to go into the treehouse, and he follows.
Mm-hmm.
And
his headless mother is floating through the air and then floats up into the treehouse.
Right. And something interesting happens here. From the audience perspective, this is terrible. This is the worst. Everything that's happening is bad. This is the baddest moment we're going to see. All the evil we've been experiencing is culminating in this moment of dread. What are we about to go see in this treehouse? The score changes to some of the happiest, pleasant, uplifting music throughout this entire thing. It's just very happy, pleasant. It's a celebratory tune that this guy has crafted for this moment, because from the cult members' perspective, this is the moment they've been waiting for. This is the happy moment. They have finally brought their king, their demon, back. He is in a male body, fully formed. this is everything they are celebrating. And the music is so jarring after everything we've already seen. I loved it. I made a note to talk about it because I thought it was almost hilarious how we're happy now that all this bad stuff has happened.
And we're happy because the visuals in that treehouse are not happy at all. I mean, that's when we see poor Charlie's head sitting atop of a mannequin with some sacrilegious symbol, like hand gestures, and this crown of thorns. Again, it's all very like, such a middle finger to everything biblical.
Very
right?
pagan. Yeah.
And they just linger on things for so long. You're just like, yep, that is Charlie's head. That's for sure Charlie's head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's definitely Charlie's head. We can move on from Charlie's head now. Yeah, it was hard to watch.
Yeah,
it was hard to watch.
The treehouse is also full of other of these cult members who are here for this celebration. It's very warm light. It's candle lights. I mean, it's just very happy moment that they're all glowing in, and then Peter turns, and you hear Ann Dowd's character proclaim basically, here you are, you've risen. We got you out of that inferior female body and into the male host that you need, and here he is. So the movie ends on this lingering shot of Peter, who is now Payman, and I'm sure nothing good happens after that, but we don't get to see it.
That's the beginning of the end for mankind. I love that one scene where it's so a mirror image of the Jesus in the manger type of scene, with that warm light and everybody there to celebrate him, and he is the new king on earth.
Yeah.
This was the cult's movie, right? I mean, throughout like all the beginning of it, all the grinding, all of the bad music, making sure things were happening, and then right there, finally at the end, we're here. Like you said, that happy music happens, and it's like, this is not a film for somebody that's like, oh my gosh, bad things are happening, and now things are going to get better, and yay, it's a happy ending. This is like, no, we're trying to get things to happen. We're making things happen right now. We really need you to do this. I need this person to die, and I need you to take over. And then finally, our king is here, and we can celebrate.
Right. It's terrifying, actually, and I'm so looking forward to us getting to rewatch Midsommar and having our episode on that eventually, because the two things that those movies have in common, aside from Ari Aster and aside from the brilliance of both of them, neither of them leave you with a good feeling. And I told you this over text message when you told me that you had finished watching it. I felt more depressed and more full of dread and just blah after I finished Midsommar than I did Hereditary. And the funny thing about Midsommar is it's all in daylight. It's broad daylight for all of it. It is Midsommar is in a category all its own, and we'll talk about that down the road. But it's unlike anything I've ever seen. This guy knows how to capture dread very well.
Yeah, I look forward to that episode too. Well, I think that pretty much does it for this.
Yeah, and again, I know we kind of jumped all over the place, but this is one of those movies that the visuals are so strong at times and so subtle at times. You have to watch it, to understand everything that's going on and to understand the brilliance of it. It's an amazing, amazing horror film. And, like we said in the beginning, it is not for everybody. And after seeing both of Ari Aster's films, I can just tell you that he is not a director for the masses. The people that love the jump scares and the fun and exciting horror movies, he's not the guy for them. If you like the darker stuff, he needs to be on your list for sure.
Yeah, he's about as dark as they come.
It's good stuff. So we still have no official rating system here at the Hallowed Horror Podcast, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that if you're a fan of darker horror and you want to see something different, immediately go rent or go watch Hereditary. I do believe it's available to rent or to watch Amazon Prime.
For free.
Yeah.
For free on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
and if you're not Amazon Prime, it's a 99-cent rental.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's amazing. And check out the score too. If you have any streaming services, go check it out. The Hereditary score by Colin Stetson is some really cool stuff. So Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. It was a great movie, great modern day. I don't even know if I want to. I don't even know if I really want to compare it to a modern day Exorcist, but it was a very great possession movie, and it was one of those. I loved how you didn't even realize what it was until the very end.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is a movie that you don't really know what it is until you watch the whole thing, because it changes directions a couple times. It shocks you constantly. It's good. I have nothing bad to say about this movie except for my one little blip about Alex Wolff's overreaction scenes sometimes. But thank you for validating me on that. By the way, I'm glad I wasn't alone.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. So, Jason, you sure nothing else?
No, I'm good. I definitely recommend this movie. It's definitely a 2 thumbs up for me, 5 screams, 5 stars, 10 stars, however you want to say it.
All the things. I give it everything that I need to give it to get you to go watch it. How about that?
Yeah. Definitely an all-time favorite of mine. And as soon as I can get the gumption back up, I might watch it again.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening. This has been episode 3 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast, where we've discussed Hereditary, and we will hopefully be back next week for a new episode.
Take care.